Hey, Trail Kreitzer at goHUNT. It's hard to believe, but it's already application season, which is my second favorite season after hunting season. You get to put in for all the different states, and hopefully your number gets pulled, and you get to draw a tag of a lifetime. One of the first states out of the gate is actually Wyoming, which typically starts their application process with elk. As part of our application strategies this year, we wanted to do some short videos, and we wanted to run through some of the most common questions that we get about Wyoming. We have a lot of new members. We have a lot of people that are new to applying in different states in the West. We wanted to run through some of these common questions that we get about Wyoming and how you can use this information in your insider account to kind of help you explore the hunts that you might want to apply for. So the first one, right out of the gate, special versus regular. If you look in your insider account, when you select your residency, you're going to have the opportunity to select either a non-resident special or non-resident regular. Those are two different pools of permits for non-residents. Those are only applicable for deer, elk, and antelope. So there is no special and regular pool of permits for moose, sheep, goat, bison, or bighorn sheep. So this is only applicable to deer, elk, and antelope. The way you can think about the regular and the special draw is that essentially they're the same permit. The difference in those is that the cost of the special permit is higher. So there are two different pools of permits that a non-resident can apply for deer, elk, and antelope. That's the regular and the special. Within these two pools, there's actually two separate pools. So the regular has a preference point pool and a random pool. The bulk of the permits are going to go to the guys with the most preference points. The other percentage of permits are going to go randomly. So there's those two pools within the regular draw. Within the special draw, it's the exact same. You're going to have the bulk of the permits are going to go to the people with the most points. The other percentage is going to go randomly. So as long as there's not enough permits for an individual hunt that you apply for, you're going to have a random chance of drawing. So even if you don't have max points, you still have a chance. Within these random pools, within both the regular and the special, there's no weight given to the number of points you have. So it's a random chance, everybody's on the same playing field. For the preference points, like I said, that's a true preference point system, meaning the people with the most points that apply for any given hunt are going to draw those permits. That's why we have some point creep issues in Wyoming, which I'll touch on a little later. But that is the most common question. To kind of wrap that up again, there's two pools of permits for non-residents for deer, elk, and antelope. That's the regular and the special. A higher price for the special permit, potentially better odds of drawing. Typically, I would say that you can draw a permit in the special pool about a year sooner than you would in the regular draw. That's not always the case for some of those really highly sought after trophy units, but generally speaking, you can draw a permit about a year ahead if you would in the regular pool, but like I said, it is going to cost you a lot more to go into this special pool. You do want to check the state rules and regs section to see what the difference in cost is between the regular and the special. The next one is, what is hunt type? So in Wyoming, they have a type system, and that's the way the Game and Fish organizes their hunt, is by types. So commonly, we're going to see questions like, what is a type 1? What is a type 2? What is a type 9 hunt? So those are different types of hunts, and I'm going to kind of talk you through those. You're going to be able to see the pop-up box, which is going to kind of delineate or help you understand a little bit more. But I'm going to talk about those real briefly. So a type 1 or a type 2 is a rifle permit. When you draw those, it's a rifle permit. So for example, the general season elk hunt, that is a type 1 permit. So when you draw it, you are drawing a rifle tag. In most cases, most units, you could also buy an over-the-counter archery stamp, which is over-the-counter. That would allow you to hunt most of the units or the unit that you drew for during the bow hunt, which is typically September 1st through the 30th. Then you could also return and hunt during the rifle season, which is the tag that you drew if you hadn't filled your permit. So a type 1 and type 2, those are both rifle permits. The way that those differ is typically that they're going to differ by season date or by portion of the unit. So you might have a type 1 in a unit, and that's good for like an early season rifle hunt. Then you might have a type 2, which is a later season, so like a late season elk hunt in the same unit. So that's how those two are going to differ. A Type 9 is one that we get asked about. So a Type 9 is an archery only permit. When you draw that, you are only able to hunt in that unit with your bow during that bow season. So you can't return and hunt with a rifle. That's an archery only season. Typically other hunts that we get asked about are Type 4 or a Type 5. So 4 and 5 are antlerless or female species. Those are full price permits. That is a point system, and I'm going to touch more on it here in a minute. But those are rifle, cow, doe, fawn, doe permits. So that's what a Type 4 and 5 is. The other ones we get asked a lot about are a Type 6 and a Type 7. So those are going to be reduced price doe tags or antlerless elk tags. So that's how those differ. Hunt type, you need to be aware of that in your application. So like I said, Type 1, Type 2 rifle tags. Type 9 is an archery only tag. 4, 5 rifle tags for female species, and then a Type 6 and 7 is for female species reduced price. The next question that we get asked a lot about is what is the deal with wilderness or designated wilderness areas in Wyoming? So a designated wilderness area is a U.S. Forest Service designation. So if you are a non-resident, you cannot hunt in a designated U.S. Forest Service wilderness area without the assistance of a guide. So you have to be with a guide or an outfitter, or with a Wyoming resident. So Wyoming resident can go with you. They do have to register as your guide, which is free. They just have to go down to the local game and fish office and register. But they can go with you and be with you and hunt inside a wilderness as a non-resident. So that's the deal with wilderness areas, and you definitely want to think about that before you make your application, because there are some units. So Unit 60, for example, in Wyoming, that unit is entirely wilderness area. So unless you have a guide or an outfitter, or you have a resident that's willing to hunt with you as your resident guide, that's a unit you probably don't want to apply for as a non-resident. There's another type of wilderness that we get asked about quite a bit, which is what is a wilderness study area? So a wilderness study area is actually a BLM, a Bureau of Land Management designation. So a non-resident can hunt in a wilderness study area. So two different distinctions, two different groups that oversee those two, BLM and Forest Service. So be aware of that. There are some areas where there are large chunks of wilderness study areas that a non-resident can hunt by themselves without the assistance of a guide or an outfitter or a resident guide. So that's the deal with wilderness area, and you need to be aware of it. I would say check your goHUNT maps, make sure that you upload the layer with land ownership and wilderness specifically, so that you can kind of start to tease apart what areas have designated wilderness areas in them that you would not be able to hunt. I touched on this one a little bit earlier when I talked about hunt type, but we get often asked about full price and reduced price licenses. What's the difference between those? So these are actually two different draws. You have a full price license draw, you have a reduced price license draw. The full price license draw are going to be your Type 1, Type 2, Type 4, Type 5, Type 9 licenses, and there might be a few other mixed in, but those are typically the ones that we get asked the most questions about. As I said, a Type 4, Type 5, that is a full price license that runs on a point system. Reduced price licenses are going to be your female species on a reduced license, so a Type 6, Type 7. These are two different draws, and when you apply, you're actually going to see two different links when you make your applications. You're going to see a full price link, you'll see a reduced price link. When you apply, you can actually apply for both. You can apply for full price, you can apply for reduced price. So those are two different sections. Be aware, antlerless female species. Full price is where you're going to apply for buck and bull, bighorn sheep, that kind of thing. So this is a full price. If you draw a reduced price license, it's not going to impact your preference point whatsoever. So once again, female species, reduced price. Full price is where you're going to apply for buck and bull. Even some full price cow and calf licenses, but you will lose your points, so be aware of that. One of the last questions that I get asked a lot is how do I apply in Wyoming? So Wyoming has a relatively easy system of applying. So you're just going to go to the Wyoming Game and Fish website. There's going to be a link there on applying for licenses. As you apply, you'll have to register. You go through a little process. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, do you have to buy a hunting license to apply for the hunts in Wyoming? and you do not. You have to pay an application fee per species that you apply for, and you also have to front the cost of the permits that you apply for. So if you're applying for full price elk, you're gonna have to front the cost of that application, that license, until they do the drawing. That's a lot of money to potentially put on your credit card. So, you know, in 2020 and previous years, they're gonna require you to front the cost. They're gonna hold on to that money. Last year, they held on to that until May when they actually conducted the draw. So they're gonna hold on to your money for that long until they do the draw. And then if you were unsuccessful in the draw, they will actually refund you the cost of the license that you applied for. So that's something to be aware of. You do have to front the cost. They are gonna hold on to that money for a good chunk of time, which is, you know, it's a sacrifice you're gonna have to make if you wanna apply in Wyoming. Another thing about Wyoming that was relatively new last year is that they're not going to give you a preference point automatically if you do not draw. They're gonna refund you the money, but you're not gonna get a preference point. You actually have to go back in during the summer time frame, the point only purchase time frame, and buy a point for that species, even if you were unsuccessful in the draw. All right, so the last one that I wanted to talk about was preference points. Preference points are only applicable for deer, elk, antelope, bighorn sheep, and moose for non-residents. For residents, there is no point system for deer, elk, and antelope, but there is a point system for residents for bighorn sheep and moose. Two species that are completely random for residents and non-residents are going to be mountain goat and bison. So those are totally random. Everybody's on the same playing field within that resident and non-resident pool permits. So once again, preference points, it's a true preference point state, meaning that the people with the most points draw the permits. There is a random portion of those, like I said, when I talked about the regular and special. But you definitely want to buy preference points for the species that you're interested in Wyoming, especially for deer, elk, and antelope. One thing that I would point out when it comes to preference points and some of the other species like moose and bighorn sheep. At this point, if you were just thinking about applying for those two species in Wyoming, the chances of drawing a permit over the next 50 years, maybe longer, depending on what you apply for, are pretty slim, to be honest. We're just too behind the curve unless they change something. If you apply for moose and bighorn sheep, I would highly encourage you to apply. Do not buy a point only in the summer time frame because it's not going to move the needle for you that much unless you're in that max point pool. So plan on applying for those two species. One thing worth considering is if you have less than max points for the permit or the hunt that you're applying for, I would encourage you to use your insider account, dig in, and find the hunts that have a random permit available. So for bighorn sheep, there's typically 5 hunts, 5 different units that have a random permit. You want to apply for that one if you don't have max preference points, because that way at least you have a chance. And like I said, it is a mandatory preference point system for that species. Same goes for moose. Do not waste your application on a unit that does not have a random tag available if you don't have enough points to draw the preference point permit. So be smart about your applications. So once again, preference points, deer, elk, and antelope, full price licenses, non-residents. There is a preference point system for moose, bighorn sheep, preference point system for both residents and non-residents. No point system for bison and mountain goat. And then once again, no preference point system for resident deer, elk, and antelope. So that kind of covers preference points. Overall, I think Wyoming is a phenomenal state. I think it's probably the best state in the West to hunt, in my opinion. If I were going to move to a state in the West, it would be Wyoming. Just absolutely awesome hunting opportunities. I would highly encourage you to either apply or plan on buying points in Wyoming. So dig into your insider account, do the research, look at your application strategy articles that will be rolling out about a month prior to this application closing. Do the research and plan on applying in Wyoming in 2021.